violates our antitrust laws. You can't have nations working together to keep other nations out of an industry, right? So we couldn't belong to it. So antitrust laws were put in place, and I'll give you kind of a quick history of it and then what's important, to protect the little guy, you know, so that they had a way to compete. Okay, there's three main reasons, and I'll go over each of these in a little bit more detail. There's productive efficiency, innovation, and allocative efficiency. I'll talk about each of those in a second. Okay, the productive efficiency is that we are producing at a, even like say we're a monopoly, that we're producing, you know, remember how we produce when marginal revenue, marginal cost intersect and then we charge up to our demand curve? Well, in cases where it's something like life-threatening stuff, like insulin or stuff, that it makes sense for the companies to produce a little bit more than what their profit maximizing amount would be. And so they're producing less than what is socially desirable. And so the government can step in and say, could you produce a little bit more? And we realize it'll drive your price down, the output up, but it'll be good for our population. Right? So that's where the productive, they're not being efficiently productive. Let's see, the innovation, we talked about that, remember with the AIDS example? My friends who started dying from AIDS back in the early 90s. And you know, the research and development wasn't there because it wasn't profitable. And it took, you know, 5 years before any of the big pharmaceutical companies got on that bandwagon. Because it wasn't profitable, so the government made it profitable. And then finally, allocative efficiency is, as opposed to productive, is where they're producing enough, but then they're not distributing their product in a fair way. And that might be price discrimination, where you're charging different people different things for the same commodity. And remember the Harry Potter book we talked about? Does that sound familiar? And so where we make enough Harry Potter books or whatever it is, we had another example. Somebody said that's old news. We have enough Twilight books. I don't even know what that means. Twilight? Is that a thing? Yeah. What's the new thing? Is it
Breaking
Twilight?
Dawn.
What is it?
Breaking Dawn.
Yeah,
Breaking Dawn.
Oh, like Hunger Games, maybe?
No.
There's another vampire, newer one.
True Blood?
Maybe.
That's a TV show, though.
So the True Blood book comes out, and all the people go, you know, and somehow the bookstores start to, they sell the book because they get the diehard fans in first, and they charge them an arm and a leg. And then the next day, the medium hardcore fans show up, and they charge them just an arm. And then the next day, the casual book readers show up, and they just charge them, closer to cost. So that's where they make enough, but they're not allocating their product in a fair way. So the government can step in and say, you can't charge people different prices for the same thing. Okay, so everybody okay with that?
Can you do?
How does the government come in and say you need to produce more? They can't make you produce more if we don't. I mean, say you're doing corn. How do you produce more?
They incentivize them.
Pardon?
They incentivize them.
Okay.
And
they
so
don't force you to. They just make it lucrative to do so.
yeah, exactly. And what they do, like an example that comes to mind is insulin, where our country needs insulin. There's no way around that. And what the insulin companies, as monopolistic as they are, I don't know how many there are or anything, but they produce where marginal revenue, marginal cost intersect, and then charge up to the demand curve. So the quantity is below the socially optimal level. So here's marginal and average. This is revenue, and then if they're a monopoly, they produce at this unit here, and they charge up to their demand curve, right? And then all of this area right here is foregone due to the monopoly. All right, so the government steps in and says, okay, could you produce up to your average revenue or your demand, which will make it go up to Q2, and we realize that the price will go from P1 down to P2, but then we'll subsidize you for the difference here. And so you're not gonna give up, and maybe not all of the difference, because they're selling more units, you know what I mean? But they'll subsidize it so they're at least breaking even.
Would they just shut them down if they didn't agree?
Exactly. They'll start.
It's either do
levying-
this or don't.
Say that again?
It's either pretty much do this or don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, they won't necessarily just walk in and say, close your doors, but they can fine them, and they can make their lives kind of difficult, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things they can do, and so companies are probably inclined to agree. Everybody okay with that? Yes, ma'am. Productive efficiency is this. So you're producing less than the socially optimal level. And so the government says, could you produce more from Q1 to Q2? Because we have people dying from diabetes, and we need insulin, which we know will drive your price down, but will subsidize you. Okay, the government intervenes. This is kind of self-explanatory, but the government intervenes when the markets aren't being efficient. And we just talked about 3 of the ways that they're not efficient. And then what they look at is, what the government looks at is the structure of the market, what it would be if it were perfectly competitive versus what it is. And I'll define that in 1 second. So when the Federal Trade Commission comes in and they're auditing you to see if you're a monopoly or if you're producing unfairly or you're allocating unfairly or something like that, what they'll do is they'll come in and they say, okay, if your industry was perfectly competitive, let me draw that again. So if your industry was perfectly competitive, all right, you would be producing at this level right here. You'd be at Q1, P1. And then they look at what your market actually is. I shouldn't have done this so close. It makes it confusing. Okay, and then what they do is they look at what you're actually doing, and they say, how much of a difference is there between this and what you're actually doing, you know, charging up to there. If there's a big discrepancy, then they get involved. And there's a litmus test for that. Then I'll tell you what that is in 1 second. This isn't a great graph, but I hope everybody kind of gets what I'm saying there. All right, so there is the natural structure and the optimal structure. This is just terms from the government, from the Federal Trade Commission. Ready? So the natural structure and the optimal. The natural structure is what a firm is doing without any intervention. And then the optimal structure is what they would be doing if they were perfectly competitive. And so we drop that graph. So this is, let me charge up to bigger man. So this is the natural structure, meaning that with no government intervention, they're acting like monopolies. And then the optimal structure is where they would be producing out at a perfectly competitive level. So that's the difference right there. And then if there's too far, if the discrepancy between here and here is too great, then they'll intervene. And there's a formula for that. Yes, sir.
That's natural, the natural structure, you're talking about a monopoly.
Yep. And if they're being unfair because of either they're pricing unfairly, so they're capturing this group, or they're not producing enough, meaning they're producing down here instead of up here, then the government, if the discrepancy is too big, then antitrust laws will kick in, and it'll either make them produce more or be honest about their charging. Yeah. Did you have your hand? Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Can you say that again about the optimal structure, what it is?
The optimal structure is what, for definition for the exam, is what a firm looks like if they were perfectly competitive. Oh, sorry. did I screw that up? Sorry, I got it backwards. Scratch that out, sorry. The natural structure is what a firm looks like when they're,
Without government intervention.
without government intervention, right, I just sort of worked out. And then the optimal structure is what they would look like if the government intervened, and that would be more competitive.
Would that
Sorry.
be perfectly competitive
Yeah.
level? Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that, I kind of went blank there. So the natural structure is them acting like a monopoly, and then the optimal structure is what they would look like if they were perfectly competitive.
You said that right.
Did I say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you have optimal structure without government intervention?
Oh, sure. Yeah, and the way you have optimal structure is lots of competition.
Mhm.
If there's lots of competition in your discipline, then it's going to force you into being more competitive.
Okay.
But when there's lack of competition and you start to control a large portion of the market, then you
Government.
start acting like a monopoly, and are the prices or is the allocation unfair? You know, and that's when they step in.
Okay.
Make sense? Okay, here's kind of they will step in if the natural is different than the optimal. We just said that. All right, and then this is actually what I just said too, and you probably have some variation of this already written down, and that is that what they do is they look at what the market would be like in a PC world, as opposed to what it is. And if it's too far apart, then they step in. And that's what this says right here. Cecil.
That's why, like, on the last quiz about the government and monopoly, I got that wrong, because I actually thought that you can't set a fixed, you can't, you know what I'm saying, you can't be unfair, the government can intervene,
You can't be unfair, or the government can intervene.
or the government can be able to intervene.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
that's
And
right.
that- I got wrong, because I put all of the,
Oh, right, right.
because I thought the government can do something about monopolizing.
Yeah, they can. They can. I mean, they step in when it's a problem for. It's not that
I think
they're
it was
being
about
monopolized.
price, I think
It was
it
the
was
De
about
Beers question about if they charge like $1 million
Mhm.
per carry.
Yeah, I remember the question. And then, so the stockholders would object, nobody would buy the diamonds, and
Government would intervene.
the government would intervene.
Or all of the above.
Yeah. And
I
so,
got it wrong.
yeah, and well, I think the answer still is that nobody would buy the diamonds. I still stand by that. Yeah.
Off-track question, curiosity. A long time ago, the government sued, maybe it was Kennedy, they sued GM because they were selling 60% of all the cars in the United States. They sued for monopoly. And, why was that? What made them a monopoly?
Because
They
they
were
control.
outcompeting their competitors. But
Well, when they start, here's what makes a monopoly by definition, is that they're keeping competition out. And so arguably, they were able to keep Ford out of the market. I don't know how, but that's what they were allegedly doing. So Ford was saying, you guys are hoarding the tires, or you guys are hoarding the manufacturing, resources somehow, and we're not given a fair chance to compete. So that's the definition. Okay, this is what I just wrote up here on the board. Same exact thing, is that in a natural structure, they might be like this, and in an optimal structure, they would be perfectly competitive. And like I've said a couple times now, is that if their natural structure is too far out of whack with the optimal structure, then they'll get involved and they'll either make them charge less or produce more. Does that make sense? And it just depends on what the situation is. And again, kind of what Rick said is that the government isn't out to get them. It's just that by being a monopoly, if there's too much market concentration, then they're keeping competition out. And that makes it so that you and I have to pay more, for our prescriptions or for our diamonds or whatever, because these companies are actively keeping the competition away and not giving us a fair chance to buy goods at a price that's driven by the market. Does that make sense? Okay, so now you can put your pencils down. There's like 6 slides that are just info. I'm not a historian, and I don't really care much about this, but just to give you an idea of where it's coming from. Okay, so just enjoy the slides. There's about 6 of them here. Came along in 1860s, and the core of antitrust laws was the Rockefeller oil. And what happened was, it wasn't that they were producing so much or too much or anything. What they did is they said, you know, all these little farmers in Texas or wherever, is they were discovering oil on their land. So they'd set up an oil well and they'd pump, you know, and oil's starting to become the fuel that drives America around there. And what Rockefeller did is they said, well, we don't care how much oil you produce, but Rockefeller had a natural monopoly in the infrastructure. And they had all the train systems. They had all the pickup and delivery systems already installed. And so you could produce as much oil as you wanted, but unless you bought into the Rockefeller transport system, you couldn't get it anywhere. So they had a natural monopoly that ruled for a long time. And to give you a sense of how big they were, when they broke up the Rockefeller oil and gas, it broke into 34 companies, including Standard Oil, Exxon, Mobil, Amoco, Chevron. So all of the big oil companies used to be just one company. So to show you how big they were, it makes sense because they were having complete control over the price of oil and gas. Right? So they broke them apart, and now these Amoco and Chevrons have to start competing against each other, which makes it better for us.
Is that what happened to Mont Bell?
Same thing. I'll talk about that in just 1 second. Okay. So is everybody? That's just kind of history, not terribly important. Actually, there is a test question here. Okay. The basis of antitrust laws is trust and restrictions on trade, meaning you're keeping competition out. And then what they are going after is monopolies or attempts to monopolize, attempts to keep competition out. And the way the verbiage is in the antitrust laws, the Sherman antitrust laws, is, and this is on the exam, and I always screw it up. And this is really what it says. It's not me fabricating it, but I don't know the story, so I'm not really sure, and I always get it messed up. The antitrust laws looked at monopolies like the big bad wolf. And they had to be able to blow the house down, but they didn't necessarily have to do it. No kidding, that's the way it's. So they were like the big bad wolf, and all they had to do was have the ability to blow the house down, but they didn't have to have done it to have something happen. Does that make sense? I'll go over it again just real quick. I'm kind of in the same boat as you.
Like they could easily go in and destructure the company, if that was.
No, okay, monopolies were, does everybody, first of all, let's talk about the story, because I get a little lost here. I'm not real sure about the story either. Is that, evidently there's a story about a big bad wolf and three little pigs.
Yeah.
Right, and the 3 little pigs, and there's a girl in there.
No, that's a different story. That's Red Riding Hood.
That's what I get confused.
There's 2 different big bad wolves. 2 different things.
2 different wolves. Okay, so there's a big bad wolf, and from what I understand, this wolf wants to eat the pigs, right?
Yeah.
And so he goes, and the first pig is kind of lazy, and he builds a little straw house, and the wolf just knocks his house down and eats the pig. Second pig, a little less lazy, builds a wood house, and the wolf just knocks the house down and eats the pig. The third house, the pig was really industrious, and he builds a brick house, and the wolf tried and tried, but couldn't break into the house. Okay, is that pretty much right? And then again, there's another wolf and a little girl, but I don't know.
Red Riding Hood, where he eats grandma.
Okay,
Yeah.
so different story. All right. So the monopoly said, with your 3 houses there, you have a straw house, a wood house, and a brick house. Just maybe.
Yeah.
All you had to do to have antitrust laws apply to you was you just A, had to be the big bad wolf, and B, you haven't had to have knocked the houses down. You just need to be able to do it. And provided you're able to knock down the straw house, then you're considered a threat.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that.
Kind of, okay. Yeah, so as long as you could take the house down in the fairy tale, and you were considered a monopolistic threat, then antitrust laws could apply. And they could break you apart just for existing, even though you've done nothing wrong.
Is that currently or back then?
It's the same law. Yeah, and they've re-edited it, you know, it's now so many generations away, but the Sherman antitrust law is still in effect.
So back then they would like at least threaten to break you up.
Yeah, if you didn't start acting less like a big bad wolf, you know. Back there and then up here.
Wasn't when Standard Oil was actually broken apart that as with electric lights came into the stores and everything, like electric lights came in, and also kerosene?
That sounds right. I'm not 100% sure, but I think you're right. And it was that they were competing so fiercely, they were keeping that competition away. Sounds familiar, but I'm not really sure about that.
So the straw houses, like other companies or other businesses.
Right.
you hit that.
Yeah, you got it. So the analogy, as your colleague just said, is that the straw house is like other companies. And so you just need to be, as a monopoly, you need to have the power to knock them out, but you didn't actually have to have done it for them to react to you.
in order to be considered violation of antitrust.
Yeah, exactly. You
Okay.
just had to have market power to where if you wanted to do it, you could.
Okay.
And the analogy again, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to throw this out there. I don't understand how Walmart is not a monopoly.
Well, Walmart, let me tell you, they've been accused of being monopolistic a lot. But why they keep winning is this, and I don't want to get too far off track, but let me kind of tell you what I know, is that right now, Walmart has about 3,000 lawsuits going on that are claiming that what's happening is that Little Joe's, I think I talked about this, is that Little Joe's Tire next door, they're getting pinched because Walmart has lowered their price below their cost. And so Joe's Tire, he can't do that because he doesn't have neckties and cabbage and, you know, underwear to rely on to keep his revenue up. Right? And so he files a suit saying that they're unfairly, what they're doing is they're allocating unfairly. The problem, and I think I mentioned this before, is okay, so Little Joe stays in business for a year, now he's flat-ass broke. He hires an attorney in Reading, you know, Bob's attorney service, you know, and they file a lawsuit against Walmart, and Walmart has 5 gunslinger attorneys from New York City on retainer. So these guys fly into town and the case is already lost before they even show up. The second thing that happens is that Walmart has been able to prove that even though they're charging a little bit under cost, which is antitrust law-ish, that they're creating a net benefit to you and me,
For the
to the
jobs.
customers. And so you and I, well, okay, they're charging a little bit under cost, but who does that benefit? You know, because now I can buy tires for $30 at Walmart as opposed to $50 at Joe's Tires.
So could you shop there?
That's not true though.
Yeah, exactly. Hold on, Rick. Hand here. Okay, and then here.
No, I was just saying that we choose to go there, so it's really
Yeah,
not,
it's
really
our
not
own-
Walmart's fault. It's our
Yeah.
fault.
As long as we support Walmart, it'll be around. Go ahead.
I don't know how they can make that case, because the competition is what keeps prices down. If Walmart was the sole seller, then the prices would go up, there wouldn't be
Well,
anybody.
that's what they do. And so they get rid of Joe's Tires, and then what happens is now they're charged back up to, you know, profitable amounts. And then Joe's Tires goes away and Walmart's tires go from $30 to $50.
And they often
And
don't
then
charge.
they start working on the next market, and they say, well, okay, we've got a lingerie store in the same strip mall. Now we're going to lower the price of our undergarments below cost and get rid of them. And then once they're gone, then they raise their price back up. And then, you know, while they lower their cost, then the undergarment store hires a local attorney, and they're already flat-ass broke, and the same 5 attorneys from New York City fly in, and it's over.
But they not only raise their prices to profitable costs, they can over-raise them when they don't have any
Oh, sure, and
competition.
then
That's
start-
what the big bad wolf is.
Right, and they can charge, once they've gotten rid of their competition, the price goes up because they decrease their output, which causes the price to go up, and now they're acting like a bona fide monopoly, and there's no competition. Now, and would antitrust work against them? Yeah, theoretically. But Walmart's been able to prove that even though they're the only game in town, that they consistently can keep their prices down because their stock is so diversified. Their capital stock. You see what I'm saying? And the other thing that makes Walmart an interesting case, and then I'll kind of stop. I have one more question, is that Walmart, what are they a monopoly in?
Everything.
How can you be, how can you be a monopoly in everything? You know what I mean? And so they're looking at markets, and they're saying, well, the market for tires isn't very competitive, or, it's like, how do you say that Walmart's a monopoly in everything? That's a pretty tough argument to support.
So is that why it hasn't worked? Because they just have so much stuff, like they say, well, yeah, this is like monopoly, but we like lower the price on this.
Exactly, yeah. And they can prove consistently that even when they are the only game in town, that they're able to keep their prices in check and they don't monopolize. Although that goes against kind of the big bad wolf analogy, you know what I mean? Because they are a big bad wolf, but even though they haven't blown the house down, they still could.
But if they do, which I don't know, because there are those like diehard people who are like, I'm never going to shop at Walmart, whatever. But if they do, then they'll just raise prices back up, and it's like, it doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah,
so they've had these low prices for these many years, but when they do get rid of, Joe's grocery store, then their prices are just going to go up just as much as you can, right? These are safely. So it's really just.
You got it. That's what they do. Yeah.
Well, they probably wouldn't be able to do that because I know there are lots of people, like, there are probably just as many people who shop at Walmart that people who say, oh, I'm not going to shop at Walmart. I'm going to shop somewhere else because to them it's necessary more like for your good.
Right,
So
absolutely.
just
And
like the quality of.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
And that's
so
what
it's
keeps
probably
them in check, is that there's a handful of customers like, you and I maybe that choose not to shop at Walmart because of that reason.
But I
And we
mean
choose
also-
to go to other stores. Up here. No. I saw another hand. We'll go kind of that way, yeah. Excuse me.
So Walmart doesn't have like any competition at all. So in other words, the only way to compete or have a business is to sell goods that Walmart doesn't sell.
Or like
Be
you
a
said,
professional for a certain
become
company, so-
different in the service, maybe. Like you go to Rayleigh's and they know your name there,
Yeah.
You go to Walmart and I think that guy's gonna beat me up, you know? You know what I mean? It's a different atmosphere, and maybe that's what draws some of us.
You look also at the amount of jobs they provide.
Oh, totally, yeah.
In Red Bluff, you've got so many people that work at the DC.
You-
I grew up in Wairika, and when Walmart came in, 17, 18 years ago, everything was fine. And then Walmart came in and completely wiped out all the little mom and pop shops, but Walmart's still there and thriving and supports half the community.
What?
The money leaves too.
Yeah, it goes back to.
Oh yeah, Wairika's gone to crap.
That's a good point,
I
yeah.
mean, whether or not people, prices are good on some things and maybe not so much on others, but you have everything in one spot. So,
That's true.
that caters to a larger market of people that just want to get everything done
Yeah.
at once.
I mean,
rather
and
than go here and go
Tires
here.
and
I'm guilty of that. I go into Walmart to buy one thing, and next thing you know, I got a full cart of things that are totally unrelated, but I'm getting them because I'm there. I'm guilty of that, yeah.
Wouldn't Target be a competition with Walmart?
Sure.
Because they also got the food in there and everything.
Oh, yeah,
so they
totally.
would be a
Yeah,
competition.
they're bona fide, kind of apples to apples competition. Rayleigh's is competition on their market side, the Sports Authority's competition on their athletic, So. Okay, let me kind of keep going here. So everybody clear on that test question? Big Bad Wolf. So what they can do, you don't have to write this down. This is just info for the history. So under the Sherman Act, they can break monopolies apart, prohibit overproducing or overcharging, and then they can impose fines if they continue to do it. Even though you've been warned, the company is still overcharging or underproducing, then they can impose a fine on it. Okay, so that in and of itself was good. But then what they discovered is that the Clayton Act really didn't have any legal teeth. Is that they could say, okay, you're violating the Sherman Antitrust Act, but there was no recourse. So along in 1914, along comes the Clayton Act. All right, the Clayton Act started to put values on what happens if you monopolize. Okay, so the Clayton Act, there's 5 things here. Real quick, just jot them down if you want. And I know there's 4 here, but there's 1 more. And I would just jot these down. Okay, so, and then maybe, you know, a little note just so you remember what it is. Price discrimination, again, is just charging different prices to different people for the same good. We've kind of already talked about that. Product tie-ins. And the company that got into a lot of trouble with that is, I think it's General Electric. I can't remember. It's one of those. What happened was they back in the 1960s, you would buy an oven, and it would have an oven and the burners, and then up above it, same unit, was a convection oven, right? And they were blue and pink and all these funky colors, right? Around 70s, 80s, along comes the microwave oven, which just disseminated or destroyed the market for convection ovens. It just got rid of it. Okay, so what GE started to do was they would say, if you buy a GE range with the oven, that we're going to build our GE microwave right into that unit. And all these microwave companies, you know, due to economies of scale, had started to come out, and they're saying that's not fair because we're producing standalone countertop microwaves, but GE is keeping us out of the game by forcing customers to buy the microwave when they buy a stove. That make sense? So they had no choice. And they were successful in making it so that GE had to separate the 2 commodities because it was anti-competitive. So tie-ins, it means if you buy one thing, you have to buy the other. These 2 are easy. Buying stock of the other company, that's simple, so you can start, you know, making decisions. Or serving on the board of directors of the other company, because now you're saying, oh no, let's lower our prices, you know. And then last but not least is exclusive dealings, and that's not up here, but. And the exclusive dealings, the company that got into trouble for that was Best Buy. And what Best Buy and Sony actually, and what Sony did was they said to Best Buy, if you know, Sony evidently are kind of higher end electronic stuff. I mean, they just tend to be, you know, a little more pricey and a little better for whatever reason. But what they said is that if you sell Sony products at this store, we request that you don't sell Panasonic. And so if Best Buy wanted to sell Sony products, Sony said if you sell our products, you can't have Panasonic in your store. And they went for it because Sony was more profitable, and they muscled out Panasonic. And Panasonic files a suit saying that's anti-competitive.
I worked at a property management company where they had a Coke machine, and one of the parts of the contract was they couldn't have a Pepsi machine there.
That happens a lot.
Yeah. That seemed, and I think that does happen a lot, because you notice they're never together.
But that's different.
Except for at Walmart.
Yeah, well, and really, you know, in most, like here, there's a Coke and a Pepsi machine, you know. But I think if it's big enough. But I notice also that you go into wherever, Taco Bell, and you want a Coke, no Coke, Pepsi. Well, it's because you signed a contract with Pepsi and you can't supply Coke.
Now, is that legal?
It's probably legal because Coke and Pepsi are competing with each other in different, different avenues, you know.
Okay.
So maybe Taco Bell is a monopoly for Pepsi, but then again, McDonald's is a monopoly for Coke.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Seems to me stuff like, wouldn't life insurance be considered like price discrimination because depending on how much you make, they charge you more?
Well, she said, wouldn't life insurance be considered? Actually, life insurance, the premiums aren't really driven on how much you make. They're driven by how healthy you are and how old you are.
Usually when you have more money, you're more healthy.
But see, you could probably, I don't know, you could get health insurance probably for the next 30 years for $3 a month.
No, not health insurance, life insurance.
I'm sorry, life insurance. And so you'd have a $250,000 payout. If I applied for the exact same insurance because I'm at higher risk than you, I'm older, my heart's giving out, my poor weak little heart, my knee hurts, my premiums are going to be higher because their risk is higher. That I'm going to die sooner before you. You have way more time to pay premium than I do. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They have different filings too, that
It just seems like
probably.
Yeah, they have. I'm sure they have limitations.
That one's not driven entirely off that. That one's driven by statistics too. Like,
Oh, sure.
depending on how many people have been in that company.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Precedence, yeah. So what was set up here is life insurance is driven by precedence too, which is absolutely true. Okay, let's see. Trouble. You don't have to write this down. Just some of the damage. The treble damages was that the lawsuit said you have to pay as much as you cost the market. That's all that says. So if you cost the market $1 million, you have to pay that back into the market. And then labor unions, which are little cartels of employees, they were exempt. So you could, because, you know, unions are little monopolies of employees, and they said those are exempt because there's protection for them. All right. The Federal Trade Commission, part of the Robinson-Patman Act, they became the watchdog. So let me back up. The Sherman Act was the original law that broke apart Standard Oil. The Clayton Act gave the Sherman Act teeth, meaning that now they could start persecuting them or prosecuting them. And then the Federal Trade Commission came in and they became the legal entity that would enforce it. So it was a real evolutionary kind of a thing. So the Federal Trade Commission became the police force for the antitrust laws. And just to give you a couple of examples, this isn't important, but just so you know, a couple of the mergers that they've stopped because there would be too much market share was Rite Aid and Revco. They attempted to merge in, I think it was 1998. Staples and Office Depot attempted to merge and they blocked it. Barnes & Noble attempted to merge with Ingram Books, who's a wholesaler. And they said, no, that creates not enough competition. And you don't have to know those, but just so they are. Okay.
Can you do that? Merge with that wholesaler if you're retail?
Well, yeah, because, well, you can, I'm sure, but the problem is it starts to eliminate, now you can produce your own books.
Yeah.
You know, that's a problem.
Can you do that?
I think on a small scale, but Barnes & Noble and Ingram are like the big dogs, you know. Okay, so, and then lastly, Robinson-Patman, you don't have to write this down, let me go through it real fast. Clarified, what time is it?
25.
Okay.
10:45.
They
10:25.
clarified price discrimination. The enforcement is the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. And this is just some of the things they can do. They can stop them from being anti-competitive, break up firms, prevent mergers that would look antitrustful, and then impose firms. Okay, enforcement, there was per se, you don't have to write this down, just info. Per se illegality, actions that always reduce competition, like OPEC or something like that. And then rule of reason says that Walmart has to be judged on an individual case because Walmart in and of itself isn't a monopoly. Except, are they monopolizing on tires or undergarments or food, you know? So each case has to be evaluated separately. Yep.
Walmart has now came out with they're like just the food sections.
Yep.
They're coming up with just grocery stores now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was
So
in
just
Anaheim.
Walmart.
Actually, yeah, and where I grew up, Lincoln, California, just 2.5 hours south, they replaced Rainbow Market, which was our local, like, where everybody shopped.
Rainbow, I heard good things about Rainbow.
I loved it. I mean,
I
when I
used to
lived there,
live
that's where we all shop, but now it's just a little Walmart grocery
Yeah.
store now. It's
There,
so,
and it's literally like
It's
only
so
a block and
weird.
a half away from a regular Walmart. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
well, like, in Lincoln now, they have, like, the Sun City, so there's a Safeway, a Raley's, and then now a Walmart within a half a mile. And it's just like, really?
Yeah.
When I first moved to Lincoln, like it was funny because like this Safeway and everything, they have golf cart parking since it's right there by Sun City.
So you go buy your beer and you go back to the golf course. That's clever.
Well, like now it's so, because like when I used to live like way out in the sticks and it was all just like such a small town, like a tiny one little U.S. bank, one little post office, and then now it's like you literally do have to watch out for golf carts and like just old people everywhere because Sun City's so big and it's such a small town, like it's such a small little.
Get run over.
You really have to watch out for them, like they're all over.
excuse me for 1 second, is that there's this corner up here that keeps being really, really disrespectful of your colleagues, and you keep talking. And I'm going to ask you to leave because I won't do it now, but this is your last chance. Because these students are sharing, I think, important experiences, and you guys are disrespecting them, and I'm not going to have it, okay? So, go ahead. Cecil?
No.
Rick?
Lost it.
Okay. Sorry to do that to you guys. Okay, changes in enforcement. You don't have to write this down. Sorry. Changes in enforcement. Okay, this is quasi-important, I guess. There are, and this goes into a bigger thing, but let me kind of explain this. Is that antitrust laws came along because of, you know, the railroad system that permeated Texas that made it so that, you know, oil producers had no choice but to deal with, Rockefeller. Okay, they had no choice. But as the years have gone by, along comes the internet and all that stuff, and the enforcement laws have had to change. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is what used to be a natural monopoly used to be like the little auto parts store that was out in the middle of nowhere, you know, and they had the monopoly on a little town. You had no choice but to buy auto parts there. Now, with the inception of the internet, if you don't like the price of a little auto parts store, you just buy it online. And so there's no need to police that little market anymore. You know, they have competition necessarily because of the internet. All right. The second thing, so that was technology. Globalization is kind of this effect, and let me kind of tell you a little bit of story. Rick kind of mentioned it before, is that back in the 70s, there was the one phone system that went across the United States, which was the Bell system. So we decided, you know, our antitrust laws decided that that was anti-competitive because, you know, there's these new phone systems trying to come up, and they couldn't compete because the infrastructure was there. All right. So what they did is they said, okay, we'll break the Bell system up into like 10 or 12 different companies. We'll have Southern Bell, and Western Bell, and Eastern Bell, and Central Bell. And then these Bell systems will have to start competing against each other, which will lower the price of phone and usage, yada, yada. Around the same time, as we broke our monopolistic-looking phone company apart, then what happened was the largest phone company in North America became Telmex, the Mexican phone system. And so what we did is we break our phone system apart, and now a call coming from Europe has to be routed through, you know, Eastern Bell and Southern Bell and Southwestern Bell and Pacific Bell, has to be rerouted 6 times to get to LA. And people started to learn, well, why, if I just call the Telmex, the Mexican phone company, they reroute me 1 time to LA, and it's less expensive. And so what we did, the lesson that we learned there is that as the world becomes smaller, we still, even though it looks monopolistic in the United States, we still have to be aware that these companies have to compete on a global level. You know, because now they're competing against, you know, firms from China and firms from Mexico and firms from, and up until, you know, I know there was trade, but up until 1960, you know, the world was a pretty big place. But as we got more and more technologically evolved, now all of a sudden we're competing with international companies. Does that make sense? So we learned, don't break apart what looks like a national monopoly because it can't compete with an international company. So anyway, that was the lesson. Everybody okay with that? So technology took apart the little natural monopolies, and then globalization took apart the national monopolies that looked too big for the United States, but were really just competing on a global level. Okay, mergers. A couple of things, and this is on, so back to writing, this is on the exam. Okay, so merger happens when 2 firms get together and form one company. So everybody okay with that? So they get together, form one company. And the three types: conglomerate, vertical, and horizontal. That's all the detail. Oh, sure. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Are we still gonna do the three types of questions?
Yeah, we'll do it. Is it 25 or 35?
Almost.
We'll do it. So kind of think back to what we covered and we'll come up with. Make the questions, think about making the questions such that people who weren't here today are going to have.
Well, the
there's an
Telmex
obvious
one,
answer
you could
and
do a
then
Telmex
there's-
one, what you just talked about.
We'll do them together.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
do them together.
What is the
Okay.
name of the grocery store bought out in Lincoln?
Okay, so there's three kinds of mergers, and I'll give you guys a guess here. So the vertical mergers, I'm starting in the middle there. Vertical mergers are like Barnes & Noble and Ingram books. So that a firm along the supply chain merges with the one above or below it. Right? So another example of that might be like Domino's Pizza buys a dairy in Wisconsin. So now Domino's Pizza is supplying its own cheese to their companies. So that's a vertical merger. You're buying a firm that's above you or below you in the supply chain.
This is McDonald's with beef, right?
Yeah, exactly. McDonald's, yeah, or buying a farm to harvest your own tomatoes or anything like that, yeah. Yes?
Is that inclusive of purchasing stock in that company? Like if Domino's purchased stock in the cheese
no,
company?
they couldn't do that.
That's
You-
not okay.
No, you couldn't, if McDonald's couldn't buy Burger King stock. They
Well,
couldn't.
no, I'm talking about like vertically, like you said Domino's and a cheese company merging
Yeah.
to make a monopoly, but could they just buy like portions of the stock?
No,
No?
it would have to be acquisition of the capital, meaning that we need to pay money to acquire the farm. We
Okay.
can't just be decision makers. Their board of trustees is going to stay the same.
Okay.
It's just the ownership will change,
Okay.
and now we have control. The board of trustees is still making the decisions, but now we're telling them we want all of the cheese. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Cheese.
Okay, horizontal mergers are two firms that are merging that are in the same industry. And generally what happens here is it's a big firm and a small firm. And so a big firm and a small firm will get together and the big firm sort of absorbs the small firm. And the example there was Rite Aid and Revco. And so bigger, I don't know Revco if we even have that here. I know we had it in New Mexico, but so a firm acquires another firm in the same industry. And then conglomerate mergers are mergers between companies that are evidently unrelated. And I'll give you guys a guess as to the world's largest conglomerate.
Google.
You'll never guess.
I thought you said you were gonna say.
I did? No.
Meredith just makes it.
This sounds like a test
You
question.
said you were going to tell us. Walmart? No. I'll give you like 3 or 4 more guesses. Procter & Gamble is on the list.
Johnson & Johnson.
No, on the list. They're like number 8 and 10 or something like that. I don't know. Anybody else?
Give us the first letter.
M.
M.
McDonald's.
What'd you say? The
Stuff.
No.
MGM.
McDonald's? No. All right. Give up? No? I love that when students say, hell no. I'm not done. Give up now?
Yes.
Yeah. The world's largest conglomerate, although they're competing now with another one from the same area, is Mitsubishi.
Oh yeah.
Really.
Oh yeah, they used to make TVs and everything.
I have a Mitsubishi television.
Me too.
And they make cars, and they make power tools, and they make pharmaceuticals. They do all
I don't
kinds
even
of
think
stuff.
about that.
The one that's catching up with them right now that has been kind of with a bullet for the last few years is Yamaha.
Oh yeah.
And Yamaha, because I don't know much about them other than their motorcycles, but they make musical instruments, they make jet skis, all these motor powered things. So they're in a lot of different things. So there's a couple of examples. So Mitsubishi and
That sounds like a test question.
Yeah, that's.
well, that'll be up to you guys. It's not on the exam, but we can throw
One
it.
of the
In. So let me get to the last point here. Everybody okay with this? Yes, ma'am.
So, horizontal mergers, Rite Aid and
Rite Aid and what's another pharmacy? Walgreens.
Walgreens.
Yeah, just two companies that are in the exact same business, or it might be like Domino's.
Like how the jar,
Okay,
has four.
the HHI index, and this will definitely be on the exam, and I'll probably put it out there to where you just have to calculate it, because it shows understanding. Okay, the HHI index is less than 1,800. Then they probably won't mess with it. Then the FTC won't mess with the market concentration. So let me back up. The HHI, I gotta read it. Herfindahl-Hirschman index is a measurement of market concentration. And if a merger accounts for a HHI index less than 1,800, then the FTC won't worry about it. Okay, and how to calculate this? So the most concentrated market, what you do is you take the square of the market share, all right? So if we have one company, let's see, one company, and they have 100% of the market share, take the square and it'll be 10,000 is the most concentrated a market can be. Make sense? So if you have an HHI index of 10,000, then you are the only game in town. Clear? If there's two companies, so we have two companies, just to give you another example, two companies, and each of them have 50% of the market share, is 50 be equal to 2,500. 2,500. All right, and so the market, the HHI in this industry is 5,000.
So the HHI index is 2,500 for each of those companies.
Right, and then just add them together to get
Okay.
the concentration in that market.
Okay.
And so if those two companies wanted to merge, they would have to be, their HHI would have to be below 1,800. Okay.
Yeah, and they would, if these two companies merged, their resulting HHI would be this, 100%. And
Yeah.
so then that would result in HHI at 10,000, that would never happen.
So they have to be way below 1,800 in order when they merge to still be below 1,800.
Not necessarily, because it could be that one company has like 2% of the market, and one company has 20% of the market. And so that would be 400 plus 4.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
But they still, once they merge, they still have to be below that 1,800.
Well, the resulting number has to be below this.
Okay.
Yep.
So how would you pass this on the test and how would we?
That's a good question. Let me go through one more example, and then we'll figure that out together. All right. So let's see. We have ice cream. Just as an example, I'll kind of calculate it. If we have an ice cream company, name a few ice cream companies.
Dryers.
Dryers, Haagen-Dazs.
Crystal.
Crystal.
Crystal?
Ben and
Yeah.
Jerry's.
Crystal, Ben and Jerry's. What else? Umpqua? I've never heard of that either. Maybe one more. Lucerne.
Lucerne, yeah.
Okay. Now, this isn't really all that important, but let's say Dryers it's got to equal 100. Dryers has 30%, Haagen-Dazs has 25%, Crystal has 15, Ben and Jerry's has 10. What are we up to there?
70?
55,
80?
65, 70, 80. Umpqua has, let me change this to 15 also. So that would be 85.
Uh-huh.
And then 10, and then 5. Okay, so the market share in this industry is going to be, and you guys may have to help me out here, 30 times 30 is 900. 25 times 25?
625.
625. 15 times 15? HHI index for this industry is 1525, 1750, 1970, 2070,
95.
21. So the HHI index for this industry is 2100. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Now let's talk about the merge. It's trickier than it looks because it's like, well, you think, well, if these two companies merge, then it's going to be under 1800, right?
But then you still have to add them together
Yeah,
and do the square of
exactly. It
it.
changes.
So it'd be 55 squared instead of
You got it. And so
difference.
if these two companies merge, on the surface it looks like it'll be under 1800, but it won't because now it'll become, in this case, if these two merge, it'll be 55 squared, which is what?
2,500 something.
2500?
25, 25, I think.
Is that right? 25, 25? So this would be close enough. 25, 25. And so even though it looks like, well, they let it merge, that would just be 1525. But if they actually merge, it's this. Does that make sense? Everybody cool with that? And then just one more just to make sure. So Umpqua and Blue Bunny merged, then the result would be equals 15, which is equal to 225. If these two merged, would that happen? Yeah, that would probably happen. Yep.
So why'd you add that to 21?
Say that again.
Why'd you add the 21?
Oh, that's the market. This is the HHI index for this whole market. It's just all
Ice
of these
cream
added
market.
together. And so this is it's not very concentrated, maybe a little bit concentrated. It's above 1800, but not by much. You know what I mean? So it's a pretty competitive market. Maybe not as competitive we'd like to see, but it's up there. Okay, everybody okay with that? Any questions about that? Okay, so back to the slides, and I'll give you 3 questions. And be creative.
The name of the grocery store in Lincoln that got bought out by Walmart.
No, yeah, that would be.
Rainbow.
Oh, Rainbow.
Or the biggest conglomerate, Mitsubishi.
I like that one. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the world's largest conglomerate, according to lecture, because you never know. Biggest conglomerate according to lecture, and I'll phrase it in a way that sounds really official.
I mean, also, it's not on your slides about the big bad wolf example.
Yeah.
We would tie something like that.
Okay, well that's actually already on the exam.
Oh,
The big
The big
bad
bad
wolf.
wolf thing's already on the exam.
So
Exclusive.
Microwave in the oven together.
that would be product.
I'm thinking about examples that you use that aren't on
what
your
brand of
slides.
coffee are you drinking today?
Yeah.
What's what?
What is the name of the company that was prosecuted for a product tie-in in whatchamacallit? And give a couple of different companies.
You know, that's okay. Let me kind of table that one. That one's not a horrible question, but we've kind of already got one like that.
Oh, okay.
You know, what's the name of a company? We've already got that. And we can certainly use it, but let's try to see if we can come up with anything else. Not a bad question. Any
So
other
does
thoughts?
Walmart have just grocery stores?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, everybody would miss that one. You know? I mean, it's like, of course not. Let me kind of scroll down. Just tell me if there's any ideas that come out of this.
You can do.
You can tell us
This?
your birthday.
No.
You can do like which ones name the order of Sherman, Clayton.
Ugh. Yeah,
Whatever.
that would be a tough one. I'm not an exciting question at all.
We're trying to make it easy.
Yeah. What time is it? 5 till?
It's quarter
Five?
till.
Okay. What do you guys? Go ahead.
How about the